Oxford from the inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth.
Welcome back to another episode of Oxford from the Inside. The good, the bad, but always the truth. I'm Georgia. I'm new on the podcast. I'm a second year French and Spanish student at St. Catherine's College. And today I'm going to be talking about the interview process with Dr. Stephen Goddard, who is also my tutor. So, Stephen, if you want to introduce yourself a little bit.
Thanks very much, Georgia. So, as you said, I'm Dr. Stephen Goddard. I teach French at St. Catherine's, and a number of the other colleges. And I've been doing that and also participating in the admissions process, the interviews process, for about 30 years or so.
Nice. Well, today the topic is the interview process at Oxford. So can you tell me a bit about what the interview process entails?
Well, it's the last part of the admissions process. There's a number of other things which people who come to interview at Oxford will have done before they get here. That doesn't mean that it's like the most important part or the final hurdle that you've got to get over, because once you have had your interview, then the people who have interviewed you will make their decision based on that and on the schoolwork that you submitted and on a number of other aspects that they know about of your work. So it is part of a bigger process, and it is the last thing that you'll actually do in that process, but it's not the absolute be all and end all.
Sorry, go ahead.
Go on.
Would you be able to tell us about the selection criteria for the interviews, if that's allowed?
Yeah. So there are some quite specific selection criteria. So, for example, we need the likely A-level or, as it may be, International Baccalaureate IB results that you are predicted to get to be within what we would want you to get for Oxford. And that can vary. Exactly what the offers would vary from subject to subject. But the main thing, rather than concentrating on those specifics, the main thing that we're looking for, and this is across all subjects, is intellectual curiosity, a desire to find out about the subject that you're going to spend 3 or 4 years studying here at Oxford, and a willingness to learn. So we don't necessarily need you to be already an expert in French or in philosophy or in physics. In fact, we very much don't expect that, because that's what we're going to turn you into.
So what kind of interview questions then usually do tend to get asked? I know it really does depend subject on subject, but even if you could tell us about French.
So I'm thinking about French specifically, which obviously is what I know best. We're going to be looking for evidence that you are self-motivated, that to a certain extent that you go above and beyond whatever it may be that your teachers require you to do. So this is absolutely not saying here is a question that you'll always be asked, but one question which might be asked is, okay, what books have you got on your bedside table now? What is it that you are reading, not as part of your schoolwork, but that you're reading for your own enjoyment right now? Now, the answer to that clearly could be anything. And in the context of me and colleagues doing French interviews, we wouldn't necessarily be wanting to say, yes, I have a French classic novel from the 19th century. But what we would want you to say is, preferably not, I've got, I don't know, Viz magazine or something like that. If you've got something which demonstrates that you are interested in the world, motivated, probably for a course like French, which is based on language or on literature, interested in literature, then that's already going to be a good start. So that's not a definite question, but it's the sort of thing to get out of you. What sort of a student are you?
Would you say it's necessary to like really like learn your personal statement and like definitely know everything that's on it? Because I know when I was being interviewed for a lot of other universities, it was very personal statement heavy. But I find with my interview, well, my two interviews, because I had one for Spanish and one for French,
Of course.
it's like some parts of my personal statement, like they were mentioned, but a lot of it was more like, here's an academic piece of writing, can you analyze it?
Yes. Yes. Now, the personal statement, absolutely know what's in it, be able to justify it, or if you like, to prove that what you're saying is true. So if in your personal statement you say, I have read French novel X, you'd better have read it, because we might decide we're going to ask you a thing or two about that novel. But it is perfectly true, Georgia, that we will also give you things to immediately, so to speak, put you on the spot. And that's going to happen not only in a French or modern languages interview, but in any interview, because being able to think on your feet, to react to things which you are told, is an important part of how we teach in Oxford. You'll know this well enough yourself. You've had tutorials, and they are effectively a dialogue between you and your tutor. You might have a friend with you in the tute, and then again, you might not. So the interview is meant to be a little bit like that. So showing you things like, haha, here is a piece of French writing, have a few minutes to look over it, and then we'll discuss it, is a little bit in miniature like what an Oxford tutorial is like. And other subjects will do that sort of thing in other ways. Back in the day when interviews used to take place in Oxford and in person, in subjects like archaeology or history, the interviewers might produce an artifact or something and say, okay, have a look at this. What do you make of it? So that sort of thing, clearly they can't give you anything directly any longer in online interviews, but something which puts you on the spot is going to almost certainly happen. But do be aware of your personal statement. Don't put anything in there that you can't justify or can't defend, because we might ask you a thing or two about that as well.
Yeah, I think one of the main things that especially students from my old grammar school that they really struggled with would be how to answer the questions. So obviously, I mean, Oxford does have a reputation for being a very high achieving university. So there's always kind of the pressure to have to show off during interviews. And if you're asked a question that you don't necessarily know the answer to, how would you go about that? Like, what would you show your thought process, or maybe be able to answer the question?
Absolutely. So this is where what you might think makes a good interview perhaps departs from what does. And one result of that is that it's entirely possible to finish an interview and think, oh my goodness me, that was a car crash. But for your interviewers to be going, oh, yeah, some potential there. So what do you do if they ask you a question to which you don't immediately know the answer? Well, they're doing that, and that's one reason why they depart from the personal statement. All the stuff on the personal statement you will probably have rehearsed. So we want to get away from the rehearsed stuff and see whether or not you can think. So they ask you the question that you don't know the answer to.
Yeah.
And you stop, and you are silent, and you think. They won't mind if you are sat there going, for 5, 10, 15 seconds while you get your ideas together. Now, that might not be how you think. You might, in fact, immediately start thinking out loud and showing your thought process. But don't be afraid of the silence. And don't go on too long. You've only got like about 25 minutes all told. But have a think about it. If you really not only don't know the answer to the question, but even don't understand the question, say, don't try and bluff. Say, can you put that another way? Or can you explain to me what you mean by the term you don't know? They won't mind. They will want you to be asking exactly that sort of question in tutorials. So it's a good thing if you're asking it in the interview. And crucially, be willing to change your mind. So let's say they've asked you that tricky question, you've thought about it, you've come up with an answer, which you have said, and the interviewer says, well, I'm not sure about that. Can you tell us a bit more about X? Or are you certain that what you have said there is correct? The correct response to that is almost certainly not, oh, yeah, I'm definitely right. Because if they're asking you that, then it probably implies that they need more information or that there's something more that you should be saying. So be flexible, give it a lot of thought, don't be afraid of the silence.
But what would you say is the best way to prepare for the interview then, if you're going to get those types of questions?
If you can find somebody who is willing to and able to do it, there is some advantage to having a mock interview. And I remember doing that a long time ago when I applied to Oxford. A couple of my teachers got together. I think they even wore academic gowns because it was a long time ago and they thought that would look good. And they, because they had been through the process, they did an interview with me. And it was a strange thing because clearly these were people I knew and I saw every day. And we all had to be pretending that, oh, yes, Mr. Goddard, hello, lovely to see you, etc. And there was a slight tendency to break out into giggles from time to time. But it was very, very useful. It allowed you to rehearse the things that you need to do in the interview. So if you can find teachers, it might be, you might even ask friends to do it. It's a lot better than nothing. I think that's kind of useful. I think also, it sounds like an obvious thing to do, but it's true of all subjects, not just modern languages, not just French. One of the best ways to rehearse is to read along. And that might even mean not only read intellectual books about your subject, but say you're applying for a modern language, read today's papers in that language. Just have stuff that you can think about and you can talk about. For modern languages in particular, and I know this isn't only about modern languages, you can expect to be asked to speak in that language for a bit. So doing a bit of practice for that wouldn't be a bad idea either. So all those things could be quite useful.
Yeah, sounds good. I think I did something similar with my teachers. I think it was with my Spanish teacher actually, but it didn't work very well because we just burst out into giggles.
That, like I said, that is kind of the problem. But yeah, even a little bit of practice, it's never going to do any harm.
Going back to the personal statement,
yeah,
for an Oxford personal statement, well, Oxford, I know you do tend to have a general personal statement for all of the universities anyway, because you apply through UCAS or the equivalent, depending on where you're from.
Indeed.
So specifically for Oxford, is it more literature based or is it more like extracurricular based?
For Oxford, put the emphasis on the subject that you're applying for. So if you're applying for modern languages or say for English or something like that, then yes, you're probably going to have a lot of literature in there. I think the modern languages course has a lot of literature, though it also has cinema, linguistics, that sort of thing. But actually broadly, irrespective of the subject, concentrate on what makes you a good candidate to look at that subject, as I said earlier, for 3 or 4 years. Why are you going to be good to teach? And for Oxford, I would probably not set too much store by the extracurricular. I will be quite interested if you've done Gold DV or if you're in sports teams or if you're an actor or that sort of thing. And it's possible that in a languages interview, we might ask you about that in French or in Spanish or what have you. But we are not going to admit you on the basis that you're a really good rugby player. You wouldn't expect us to do that. And the knowledge that you're a really great rugby player, we're kind of a bit interested, but that's not going to make any difference. So go for things which are relevant to the subject that you're applying for.
Yeah, I think that's just all the time we have for today, really. So I mean, thank you for doing this.
You're very welcome.
Really appreciate it.
No problem.
And I guess I'll see you all soon.
Yes, good luck, everybody. Thanks very much.
Thanks.